Hi, everybody. I'm Liz Walker. Welcome to From the Heart. I am so excited to be back in the rhythm of doing these live streams weekly because there's so much to talk about in the efforts of healing our world. I had the honor and privilege of being a part of a group that helped create the Embrace Memorial in Boston. It's on the Boston Common, and it's a must-see visit, whether you live in the city or anywhere in the world, to come and see this memorial that honors Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King. It is a beautiful bronze monument that lifts up love. The memorial is considered an important cultural symbol of equity and justice, but I have found over the years it represents so much more.
So often in our lives we're challenged and we feel like we should be entrenched and divisive and oppositional. While it is really very much about and inspired by the Kings, it also is about all of us.
There were some feelings. I'm just going to say that.
For Black people, get to build things that are built to last.
We have so many monuments where we're looking up to men on horses and men with capes, and men with guns.
Art should make you stop, think, listen, and then go talk about it.
The level of education, the level of intellect that they represent. We are so much more than our hurt. We are also our happiness, our joy, our prayers, our spirit. We are so much more than our hurt.
Over the years, the Embrace Memorial has come to mean all kinds of things to all kinds of people, but to me, it really signifies healing in our country. And that's the reason I invited the president and CEO of the Embrace organization and a good friend of mine. I consider him one of my many sons in Boston, to be with us tonight. Imari Paris Jeffries, who is the power behind Embrace. Imari, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I don't know about the power, maybe the workhorse or the motor, but I'm so glad to see you. So glad to be a part of it. Anytime I get to spend with you is golden time for me.
See, that's why you're so good. But thank you. I take it. You're leading a citywide racial equity transformation. That's what it says, that's what I read, and that's what I believe. But explain to me what that means and how that fits into the Embrace Memorial and the Embrace organization.
When we started this, and when you started this as one of our co-founders with Paul and Damon and Kia and Reverend Brown, but really you and Paul were the first two that started this. It was really this idea of memory and history, and this idea that people did not know that Martin and Coretta's love story had begun in Boston, that they met here as students, they fell in love, and the rest of the history we know, but we didn't know the importance of Boston as a city. A couple of years later, the pandemic happened, the murder of George Floyd happened, Breonna Taylor's murder happened, and the Embrace became a galvanizing movement for community. It was a way for Boston to honor the memory of Martin and Coretta, but also honor the memory of other leaders from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, but also make a commitment that Boston would be a city that would hold the truths of justice and belonging and anti-racism, even if we survive past the pandemic. And so the monument served as a memorial to that family, memorial to those leaders, but also a promissory ring that our city made to itself and the world.
We made it through that time. We made it through the pandemic. We scratching and kicking and fighting. We've made it through those horrible deaths. But who knew that in some ways things would get worse? And I certainly believe that we're living in a really frightening time right now. So how does Embrace work? How do you work right now in this really polarized and contentious and chaotic moment in history?
Yeah, one of the things that we realized just through the journey of building the Embrace, there were a couple of things that were happening. We were building community. It was an inclusive process. We were asking people's advice, soliciting names of artists and activists that we were going to put on the memorial. What we were doing was building social infrastructure. And so social infrastructure is the type of relationships that used to happen full-fledged in faith-based institutions, used to happen full-fledged in union halls, used to happen full-fledged in block parties and community gatherings. And the pandemic, as it limited our ability to gather in person, the Embrace Monument became an opportunity for us to build that social infrastructure. And we understand physical infrastructure like road and bridges, but social infrastructure is what we need as human beings to tie us together in community. And so the Embrace process built that. And so we know that that is important for our survival as a democracy. And so we continue to build that as an organization. The other thing that we were doing was practicing democratic maintenance. And so democracy occurs not only 3 months, 4 months, 6 months before we vote, but it occurs at block parties when people discuss their kids going to college. It happens when people discuss potholes, when they're talking to their neighbor. It's when you realize Mrs. Johnson across the street hasn't left their house in a couple of days and you need to check on them. It's the love and the care that we have for each other. And that's where this democratic maintenance occurs. And so in the process of building the monument, we understood that we were an organization that built democratic maintenance. We were designed for that. And so in this new era where we see democracy being attacked, in the civil rights era, we were fighting for a place in democracy, right? Democracy in education, democracy in housing, democracy in the ability to make a living, democracy in higher education. We're in an era where all the resources to get to those places have just been eliminated. And so we're seeing another way in which democracy is being attacked. And so social infrastructure, democratic maintenance, history, memory is what Embrace is focusing on now.
And in what ways? Because when you say that, that sounds really wonderful, but these are really frightening times. There are times when many people are afraid to speak out, speak up, because you don't know. You might be arrested. You might be sent out of the country, especially if you're an immigrant or something. So how do you do that now in times of great fear?
Yeah, we were born by fire, in the iron meld of real heat in the triple pandemic. We were made for moments like this. The organization was made for moments like this, and so we are continuing to lift in moments like this. So one of the ways that we're doing that is ensuring that public memory is not erased. And so we're partnering with another group, and we're unveiling our second monument in July, a W.E.B. Du Bois monument in Great Barrington.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's wonderful.
And so we have about 3 active monument projects going on right now that will be unveiled over different times. We will be unveiling 10 markers, the historic bronze markers on buildings across the state over the next 18 months. And so in the 250s, the semi-quincentennial, the celebration of our country, we want to ensure that the history of diverse communities are not erased. And so we are doubling down on telling diverse history of our country, especially in our country's 250th anniversary.
I love that. And I love especially that you reminded us that we were born in these times. We come from people who went through these times. And so, right. But we have to be reminded of that, because otherwise it's easy to slip into the fear, into the trauma, into the terror. But tell me about the Du Bois monument in Great Barrington. What's that going to be, and why and where?
And, people don't know, in the same way that people didn't know that Martin and Coretta met in Boston. I think if you ask most people, they would have thought Alabama or Mississippi or Atlanta. People don't realize that the founder of the NAACP, that the first Black person to receive a PhD from Harvard, that the father of Black studies, was born and raised in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. He is from Massachusetts. And so we are honoring him with a group of activists who started this process years and years ago and invited us to be partners with them to build this monument for W.E.B. Du Bois. The artist is Richard Blake. And so it is Du Bois sitting in front of the town library, this place of knowledge, with his arms welcoming people into the town, into the library, into the community. And so we're so grateful that community has created a mini organizing movement in Great Barrington, in the Berkshires, in the same way we did in Boston. And so there's this way in which monuments galvanize people to create movements that live beyond the monument. And so that is the power of Embrace, the organization, to understand that monuments are just excuses to build social infrastructure. They're just excuses to practice democratic maintenance. They're just excuses to ensure that memory and history are continued to be told.
There, that is beautiful. They're not just excuses, though. They also kind of point us to that. They guide us. They're like a light that we can go. I can go stand in front of Embrace and remember, as you've said, and think about what else needs to be done. And certainly a lot needs to be done at this time. I know that you know Brian Stevenson, and you know what's been going on in Montgomery, Alabama, and that's certainly kind of a lead democracy building memorial there. But do you see this kind of thing going on around the country? The Equal Justice Initiative down in Montgomery is one huge example of public art taking on the past and the future. Are there other projects like this around the country?
Well, the Monuments Lab in Philadelphia is really our country's premier think tank around the role of monuments, and they created what they call this monuments map that documents all of the monuments across the country. At Embrace, we think about monuments like we call them analog cookies, in the same way that digital cookies on your computer, once you accept them, continue to sell ads in shoes because you accept the cookie, you close your browser, then digital cookies sell you ads. Monuments are like analog cookies. And so whether you know this or not, they are continue to sell you ads around the values of the people being memorialized, ads around the individuals or the actors who have been memorialized in bronze. Most people don't know there are over 700 monuments of Confederate leaders still erected in our country. There are over 210 schools named after Confederate leaders still in our country. There are over 7 waterways and counties named after Confederate leaders still in our country. If these are not propaganda tools that are not acting as analog cookies to convince people of values that no longer or that are actually not true, I don't know what is. And so we have to build more monuments of love, more monuments of truth, more monuments of an inclusive history. And so I think that's the role of Embrace. How do we do that? How do we work in communities to tell their stories, to build democracy, to heal? Monuments have the power to heal when people are seen, when people can tell their story, when people can realize that their humanity is acknowledged. It has the power. It has the power to heal, and we see ourselves as a healing organization as well.
I see you as I see us as a healing organization, but we're trying to heal. It is a battle, Imari, because I just read an article of someplace in Western North Carolina where a monument had been taken down, or acknowledgement of the Confederacy had been taken down, and now it's being put back up by the city fathers, who believe they have license to do that now because of those in the administration. It is a battle of the narrative. So it's not like, it's all good and all we have to do is build our monuments, or is it? I mean, recognizing that there is a counter narrative.
And, narrative is also part of the work of Embrace. We have 3 journalists. I don't know if you know this. We have 3 journalists on staff.
I did.
And so we are going full-fledged and a full-time researcher. So we're going full-fledged on telling stories, but I think the approach has to be different. We tried in a very direct approach, and it did not resonate with people, because while we were saying one thing directly, they were hearing something else indirectly. And so we were competing with both digital and analog cookies simultaneously while we were saying one thing directly. And it, to a certain extent, led to this moment that we're in now. And so I'm wondering, in this new moment, do we have to reimagine the language that we use without compromising the humanity of ourselves and our allies? Do we have to use, as John Powell refers to, this targeted universalism approach? Can we think of ways, can we imagine ways that benefit unapologetically one group that we all benefit from? And an example of target universalism advantage would be sidewalk cutouts. Those sidewalk cutouts were advocated for by folks who have mobility issues, for folks who have mobility concerns. And so they advocated for these sidewalk cutouts so that they can get on the sidewalk when they cross the street. Because before the 70s, it was just a cliff. You just walk off the sidewalk.
Right.
But now I can't imagine pushing a baby carriage or rolling your luggage or rolling anything or even walking across the street without a sidewalk cutout, right? Another example of targeted universalism is subtitles on TV. I don't know about you, like I don't need subtitles on TV, but every time I watch a show, I turn the subtitles on.
Yeah.
I want to read the dialogue as I'm watching the shows. That's not designed inherently for us. That was and is designed for folks who are hearing impaired or hard of hearing. Another example is fluoride in the water. Fluoride in the water is designed to take care of our teeth in a way that benefits all of us, right? It is automatically something that is benefiting us naturally. And so a targeted universalism approach, monuments are targeted universalism, right? It isn't this direct approach where you are using the power of guilt to change people's minds. You're using the power of advantage and benefit and universalism to change people's minds and attitudes.
Are you then trying to use this targeted universalism in a way that means I'm going to stick this monument up and you've got to take yours down? Or are you saying no matter what you do with your monuments, meaning those who would oppose the truths that we speak, we're just going to keep on working on targeted unit? You know what I'm saying? Do you have to have an adversary? Do you have to, is it a battle? Or is it just a matter of staying focused on what you have to do?
Yeah, I think there is some work around taking some stuff down, right? That is true, right? We can have hate monuments up, right? Because they are working as they are intended to work. But there is probably a sequence to getting there. And one of the ways in which we think we need to get there is working on this poverty of empathy that is accompanied with those monuments being up. Working on this zero-sum thinking that is accompanied with those monuments being up, because those monuments reinforce this poverty of empathy. Racism reinforces this zero-sum thinking. And so me taking these monuments of hate down means that you are erasing my culture. And so you putting a monument of love up means that I am losing something. And so that value is something that we need to work on through direct narrative. And that's where targeted universalism works. How do you do something, do an action that people feel like they also benefit from this too? There's something about human nature that prevents people from engaging. And oftentimes we draw from Maslow's hierarchy of need. You remember that triangle when, sometimes in high school, sometimes in college, there was this triangle, Maslow's hierarchy of need. And at the top of the triangle was self-actualization. At the bottom of the triangle was food, shelter, clothing, safety, love, belonging, acceptance, self-actualization.
Right.
Anti-racism is a self-actualization conversation. And so it's hard to have this conversation where you can sustain self-actualization with someone when they're operating on a food, shelter, clothing level, when they're or at least they feel they are, when they're talking about, I'm a white person from Arkansas and my eggs are now $7, or my rent is now $2,000 and I only make $10 an hour. I can't even imagine having an anti-racism conversation or a conversation where I'm acknowledging people's pronouns when I'm having a food, shelter, clothing conversation, or I'm having a safety conversation. And so I think we have to meet people where they are without compromising folks' humanity. And so I think it has to be a both and there.
But there's also this manipulation going on of those in power who are saying those who have that basic need, that the reason they have that basic need is because of those who are at the top, saying that we have other things that we need to talk about. So there is this kind of us against them narrative that is, I think, very manipulative and holding us back from talking to each other, which is what I hear you saying. Am I at least close to the problem we face?
I agree, and that's why this targeted universalism approach has to be, because we with some folks, we are just never going to have a conversation with them that they're going to understand. There's too much manipulation, too much coming at them for us to have a conversation where they can sustain that. So we just have to create something that is going to benefit them, like a sidewalk cutout, like fluoride in the water, like vaccine. One of the things around targeted universalism that people don't realize, the reason that we have grocery stores in close proximity to each other is because of SNAP. The SNAP benefits of people who receive SNAP allows grocery stores to have the subsidies to actually create the grocery stores, because grocery stores are not an industry. That's another example of targeted universalism.
Well, tell us what SNAP is for those few who might not know what SNAP is.
So SNAP, like for the shorthand is food stamps. And so folks who receive food stamps or food subsidies actually provide the benefits for grocery stores to actually build as many grocery stores in neighborhoods that are close proximity to each other, which is why, so that is another example of targeted universalism. We got to stop talking about it and stop trying to have a conversation with people around why food stamps is a good thing. We just need to do it. Because there's too much convincing people. Oh, people are trying to take the food stamps, or like they're taking advantage of the system. Little do they know is that everyone is benefiting from having a grocery store that is in close proximity to their home because of people who receive SNAP. Because otherwise there would not be that many grocery stores, because the cost of producing food in this country is not a lucrative business for grocery stores. Folks who receive SNAP create enough subsidies so that grocery stores and the grocery industry can have so many stores, can have enough stores, and for it to be lucrative enough so that everyone can have stores that are in close proximity to where they live. Otherwise, we would not have as many grocery stores. That is an example of targeted universalism. And so instead of convincing people of a point so that we can be right, I think we just got to do it. It's easier for us to show you than to tell you, and I think that's where we are. Let's just do it. I don't know anyone who would say, I don't want sidewalk cutouts. Make those sidewalks uncomfortable for me. I don't know anyone who would say, I don't want the ability to use subtitles because and so targeted universalism is an advantage for one singular group that we all benefit. And I think that is the approach for equity.
But I don't want to be the devil's advocate all the time. We know that people do vote against their own self-interest. We know it's happening all over the country in rural areas. And I don't want to turn this political, but I'm just saying that we do sometimes move in interests that are not our own when we are manipulated. That's what I'm trying to say. Does that make sense?
That's why you and I are agreeing. That's why we got to do targeted universalism.
Okay.
Because we just got to do it and have people just get the benefit of it. Because if we try to talk to people about this is the right thing for you, they're too manipulated to vote in their own interest. Let's just do it.
Okay.
Like universal pre-K, let's just do it. Because if we have a conversation around people voting, why do I need pre-K or why do we need this? We won't do it. people won't vote against things. People will, like you said, people will vote against things that benefit them directly or downstream. So we should just stop talking about it. We should just do it.
I love your attitude. I love the positivity that you bring here. But this is hard work that you're engaged in. What drew you to this in the first place, Imari? You have 3 degrees. I think. How many PhDs do you have? Maybe you study this kind of thing, or because a lot of the information that you teach us, I never heard of.
Well, I think what drew me to Embrace was you. I remember. I don't know if you even remember one day you were recording the documentary, "The Legacy of Love," and I bummed. You were in the ministry talking, and I came with Reverend Liv, and you're like, you're talking to me. I'm recorded. I don't know if you probably don't remember that because you were standing in the corner where Ferdinand Bielin was, and I knew you were a part of this. And so in 2017, when this was getting started, I wanted to, in some way, shape, or form, be a part of this. And in the beginning, it was just a monument, and that was just enough. And as the moment changed, the organization changed, and I think as one of the founders and board members, the trust that you had in me and the staff to change as necessary was a gift. And it's not that often that Black leaders get the benefit of a board of influential Black folks and white allies who trust them. And so I think that's what drew me to try my best to make Embrace more than the monument, but to continue the work of the spirit of the monument.
Well, and that is very complimentary and very compassionate and very beautiful. But you have to have some of this notion, and I'm not trying to trivialize it because I'm saying what you're saying, but Imari, you had you knew where you were going. I mean, was this a surprise to you that I didn't know how impactful public art was at that time on my emotions, on my feelings, on my ability to heal? It was through you that I learned the depth of the impact. So did you know that all the time? Is that what you studied in school? Seriously.
It's what I was studying, get my PhD in. And so my research is around socialization experiences for Black doctoral students. And so many people don't realize that the academy in higher education, particularly in doctoral programs, want you to think about knowledge in a certain way. And oftentimes that knowledge doesn't look like the ways in which Black people and other people of color see as authentic knowledge. And so they strip you of your knowledge in order to get you new knowledge. And so Black people live in the world with all sorts of epistemologies, and higher education socializes you into different ones. And so there are a lot of things, a lot of accoutrements of higher education that do the socialization. And so there's a reason why when you graduate, you put on a cap and gown. Now, higher education institutions are not religious organizations, but they're rooted in this Western Christian tradition. And so the monks at the time were the most learned people. And so you can imagine these monks with these scrolls in the monastery with their robes on. And when it was cold, they would put their hoods on while they were studying. And so when you are receiving your PhD, you get hooded. And so that's what that is. And so there's this correlation between these religious icons that are in higher education and the learning that are synonymous, that are interrelated. And so if you think about countries like China, who also have higher education institutions that are not Western Christian countries, they also use robes, they use cap and gowns, they have commencement, they have convocation, these things that are squarely Western tradition Christian words, ceremonies, accoutrements, regalia. But those things have now become synonymous with education. And so those things are now socialized and synonymous with higher education. And so without knowing, these physical objects are socializing you into something and into a set of beliefs that might be contrary to yours. You might be from China, you might be a Buddhist, and you are doing all these convocation and you're wearing your cap and gown and you're doing all these things, and you're not Christian at all. You're a Buddhist, but you bought into this culture, these ideas contrary to what you knew. And that's the same thing that happens to Black people, and not the Christian part, but the knowledge part. And so you are adhering to these forms of knowledge without their knowledge, and these things that seem like very ordinary rituals and traditions are actually socializing you into a culture that you don't realize it. And so monuments in the built environment do the same thing.
Wow. Oh, wow. But now you sound like the guys who are saying, so we don't need higher education. And that's not what you're saying, right?
No, we absolutely need higher education. We absolutely need higher education. You know, the higher education has now become vocationalized. And so instead of being a place where you can experiment and interrogate knowledge to then place that knowledge for meaning and sense making, it's now a place where, you know, how am I get a job? And that's where now it's a problem. It's a
Right.
challenge.
Right.
It's a challenge. I'm a firm believer in liberal arts education, but the idea of objects and rituals socializing you into things, it was where my study was. And so when you think about, you know, how the ivory tower, the library, the quad, the built environment in a higher education environment also socializes you into that built environment. And so a lot of times when Black folks who are first generation students go into higher education institutions, they feel uncomfortable because it's not an environment they've ever been to, that they've ever experienced. And so you have organizations like Posse who create posses of young people who come from your neighborhood because they know that you need a community that comes from and that have shared values in order for you to be in a different environment that's trying to socialize you into something else. And so that very phenomenon of the built environment and culture socializing you into something else, the application of that outside of higher education, it was what we were doing at Embrace. How do monuments and the built environment and culture socialize people into something else, right? And so, you know, I tell people this about meat eating, right? And you know, I'm not judging people for meat eating. You know, I don't eat meat now, but you know, when children are born, they use and they eat mother's milk or formula, and then they usually eat pureed vegetables. And as soon as they get teeth, you know, what do we give them? We give them solid food. And what's that solid food?
Meat.
Meat. And when we go out for coffee or social customs and we have coffee, people ask you, well, what do you want in your coffee? Milk or cream, right? In your coffee. When we have holidays during 4th of July, what besides lighting fireworks, what do we eat on 4th of July?
Barbecue.
Thanksgiving. What do we eat on Thanksgiving?
Turkey, yeah.
What do we eat on Christmas? A ham.
Ham. Okay.
And then New Year's is probably some of us chitlins and black eyed peas with the ham hock in the greens. And so like these rituals have socialized us into meat eating, even though intellectually we know we don't need protein from meat anymore. We're not in the era of human beings where that's the only way we know how to eat protein. We know that factory farms harm animals. We know that mammals don't produce milk without being manipulated to produce milk in order for us to get our milk. We know that eggs don't come from chickens for no reason without manipulating these animals in order for them to produce eggs and milk. We know that intellectually, we don't need protein, but those customs and rituals have socialized into eating meat. It would be very difficult for people to just stop cold turkey from eating meat. And in some of our cultures, you're like, you try not eating meat on Thanksgiving.
Right.
And then what's wrong with you?
You're going to be by yourself. Right. Right. So what's the counter to this, to bring it all into a nice, neat bow? How do you counter that socialization you're talking about?
I think we have to socialize people into new cultures. And that is what we tried to do. And we tried to do with Juneteenth. We had this very, very new holiday that mostly only Black Americans knew what it was. How do we socialize Juneteenth as a holiday that is everyone's holiday without commodifying that holiday? And how can it be a holiday for liberation? How can it be a holiday that centers Black people, that other folks don't feel like, what about my holiday? Or it's not commodified where Walmart is selling Juneteenth napkins and freedom ice cream freezer. How do we do that? How do we create new cultures? So we have to create counter rituals of togetherness. And so these monuments are counter monuments that have different values associated. So not monuments to guns, not monuments to war, not monuments to pillage, but monuments to love, monuments that center brown people, monuments that center collective groups that have a bunch of names on them, monuments that ask communities input, monuments that don't look like a great man on a horse with a knife and a uniform. More of those, have that be normalized, have holidays where your favorite holidays are Lunar New Year, Juneteenth, and your favorite Jewish holiday, one of the high holidays. And you could be, Black from South Carolina, but those are your favorite holidays because you appreciate those cultures. Mm-hmm. And how do we see ourselves in those other cultures without saying, well, what about me? Mm-hmm. Or commodifying it in the way that Cinco de Mayo is about, cosplaying Mexicans with red cups. And so I think we have to create new cultures and new rituals. And so that's what I think activists and other organizations are attempting to do, is to create these other inclusive rituals. Our MLK is also an inclusive ritual. It is a festive, fun way to celebrate Martin and Coretta that honors a same-sex couple as Martin and Coretta, a white couple as Martin and Coretta, a Black couple as Martin and Coretta, that has wealthy Black people and wealthy white people, and your nail tech is in there, and the person that does your hair is in there, and the thing that bonds us that we all have a core memory is sneakers. Most Americans' first piece of purchase art are sneakers, like tennis shoes. I don't care if you're from Wellesley or you're from Watts. Your first pair of purchase art, design art, is sneakers. And that is a way that connects us through something that bonds us. And so how do we create more things that bond us instead of divide us, and have it look like a party? And so that's targeted universalism.
Wow.
It looks like a party, but we are intentionally trying to curate this milieu with an object that people don't even remember why they have this affinity to tennis shoes or sneakers, but they do. You saw how excited people were to wear some sneakers and to dress in the nines.
For so many reasons, yes.
Many reasons. And we got your barber in there, and the taxi driver, and the multimillionaire, and the hedge fund manager, and the guy who runs the swimming pool, and the guy who makes the sandwiches, all in this space, celebrating Martin and Coretta, honoring these brilliant couples.
Yeah, that's what I love about the very basics of the memorial itself, that these are arms around bodies, and anybody could fill in that space. That we know it's to Coretta and we know it's to Martin, but their message of love, embrace, was for all of us. And it's a story that is told so well in that memorial on Boston Common. And talking to you, this is really good, because again, every time I talk to you, you take me to another level that I hadn't thought about. And I know that you've done that for those who are listening now. So Imari Paris Jeffries, you are a force. With or without me, you are a force. And I am just honored to be your friend, and thank you. And I wish you just the best. Godspeed for the work ahead, because it's not easy work, because there's a counter narrative that's just punching at us. But I think you have an answer here. So thank you. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Okay.
Thank you. I love you and I appreciate
I
you.
love you, and I'll see you soon. Thanks a lot.
See you.
Okay, bye-bye.